Formula One is supposed to be the ultimate test of speed and skill, but sometimes the races get so wild, even the rulebook can't keep up. Take Monza, 1961. A Ferrari went airborne and straight into the crowd at 180 miles an hour. In seconds, 15 people were gone, including the driver. Then jumped to the 2005 US Grand Prix. Over 100,000 fans packed the stands, waiting for a showdown, only to watch 6 cars crawl around after a tire scandal sent the rest to the pits. From horror to humiliation. These are the races so insane, they forced Formula One to change just to survive. So let's start with a night in Berlin. Race 1, 1959. German GP, Avis, the banked death trap. Berlin, 1959. Formula One wanted speed, and Avis delivered it. 2 long straights joined by terrifying brick-paved banked corners that looked more like a roller coaster than a racetrack. Drivers hit 280 kilometers per hour on the straights, tires screaming on the 43-degree banking. It wasn't racing, it was survival. From the start, chaos was guaranteed. Cars shredded tires mid-corner, suspensions cracked, and engines cooked under the strain. On lap 2, French driver Jean Behra, already furious after being dropped by Ferrari, lost control of his Porsche sports car in a support race. He hit the wall, the car exploded, and he was thrown out instantly. It was brutal, even by 1950 standards. The race itself was dominated by Tony Brooks in his Ferrari, but nobody cared about the win. The track had terrified everyone. Drivers called it insanity on bricks. Officials agreed. Avis was written off immediately after that weekend. Its concrete banking was demolished years later, a relic of an era when spectacle mattered more than survival. That day, Formula One learned that chasing pure speed without safety could end in disaster. Other disasters happened because of the bad tires like this next race. Race 2, 2005 United States GP, the 6-car farce. Indianapolis, 2005. The biggest market Formula One wanted to conquer America. Over 100,000 fans packed the stands, ready to see 20 cars tear into the brickyard. Instead, they witnessed the sport's most humiliating day, the issue: tires. Michelin discovered their rubber wasn't safe for the high-speed final corner. A failure could be lethal. Teams begged for fixes, add a chicane, change tires, delay the race. The FIA refused. So when the lights went out, only 6 cars, the Bridgestone runners, actually lined up to race. Ferrari, Jordan, Minardi. Everyone else peeled into the pits, leaving fans screaming, booing, and throwing bottles as the so-called United States Grand Prix rolled on as a joke. The fallout was brutal. Formula One's image in America was shattered overnight, and Michelin's reputation torched. The rules around tire supply, safety intervention, and minimum standards were rewritten to make sure the sport could never embarrass itself like that again. It wasn't just a failure, it was proof that one decision, one refusal to bend, could break the entire sport in front of the world. For once, the disaster wasn't caused by drivers, but by the people running the show. Speaking of people and shows, the next race made those that came to watch the show regret. Race 3, 1961 Italian GP, the day the crowd died. Monza, September 10th, 1961. The Italian Grand Prix, the Temple of Speed. Thousands packed the grandstands to watch Ferrari's rising star, Wolfgang von Trips, battle his young teammate Phil Hill for the world title. But within minutes, celebration turned to horror. As the cars thundered toward Parabolica on lap 2, Von Trips and Jim Clark's Lotus made light contact, just a brush, but at 180 miles per hour, that was all it took. The Ferrari launched skyward, spiraling into the fencing, its nose slicing through the crowd. When the chaos stopped, Von Trips lay dead beside the track. So were 14 spectators. Phil Hill went on to win the race and the World Championship, but no one cheered. The podium was silent, a funeral march echoing across Monza's historic banking. The images from that day horrified the world. The sport had always been dangerous for drivers, but this was different. This was a mass tragedy. F1 knew it could never allow that again. The high-banked oval was abandoned, and the era of slipstream duels at Monza was over. Chicanes and safety barriers came next, permanently changing the character of the circuit. Monza was supposed to crown a champion. Instead, it exposed the sport's deadliest flaw: speed without restraint. And yet, just over a decade later, F1 returned to another track surrounded by city streets and concrete, where chaos would strike again. Race 4, 1975 Spanish GP, the Montjuic Park disaster. Barcelona, 1975. Formula One's circus rolled into Montjuic Park, a twisting street circuit draped through the hills above the city. It was beautiful, fast, and a disaster waiting to happen. From the start of the weekend, the drivers protested, barriers were loose, fences half-bolted, marshals untrained. Emerson Fittipaldi refused to race, calling the track a death trap. But under pressure from organizers and politics, the show went on. On lap 26, the inevitable happened. Rolf Stommelin's rear wing snapped at full speed, his Hill GH1 catapulting over the barrier into the crowd. 4 spectators were killed instantly. Stommelin survived, but was severely injured. The race limped on under red flags and confusion, finally stopped at half distance, just enough to award half points. It was chaos, grief, and disbelief rolled into one. The tragedy forced the FIA to finally confront something it had ignored for years: that glamour couldn't justify negligence. After Montjuic, no driver would race without proper safety inspection again. Barriers, fences, and track checks became mandatory standard. Montjuic Park was never used again. Its beauty turned to a graveyard, a symbol of what happens when spectacle outruns responsibility. But if Spain 1975 was the moment F1 started tightening its safety belts, the next year, in Germany, would show why that change came too late. Race 5, 1984, Dallas GP, the day Formula One melted. Dallas, Texas. July 8th, 1984. Formula One tried to conquer America again, but this time, the enemy wasn't speed, or rain, or chaos. It was the sun. Temperatures soared past 40 degrees Celsius. The temporary street circuit built around Fair Park started crumbling before the lights even went out. The asphalt literally broke apart under the heat. Patches lifted, holes opened, and by the halfway point, it looked less like a Grand Prix and more like a construction site. Cars spun everywhere. Drivers fainted from exhaustion. Nigel Mansell, after pushing his car across the line when it broke down on the final lap, collapsed on the track. Out cold. It was the first and last Dallas Grand Prix, a race that became legend for all the wrong reasons. The FIA had to act. From that moment, new standards for street circuits were enforced. Stricter surface testing, heat endurance requirements, and safety inspections days before any race. No more temporary experiments just for show. Dallas proved that Formula One could build a race anywhere, but not everywhere should host one. The heat melted the track, but it also melted F1's patience for poor planning. Sad fact was that just few years ago, F1 was taught a vital lesson that sometimes danger doesn't come from machinery. Other times it came from fate itself. Race 6, 1977. South African GP, the day tragedy struck twice. Kyalami Circuit, South Africa, March 5th, 1977. A sunny afternoon that turned into one of the darkest days in Formula One history. Midway through the race, Renzo Zorzi's Shadow Ford caught fire on the pit straight. 2 teenage marshals, both barely trained, barely equipped, ran across the live track to help one of them. 19-year-old Frederik Jansen van Vuren was carrying a heavy fire extinguisher. At that exact moment, Tom Price came flying over the crest at 270 kilometers per hour. He never saw the marshal until it was too late. The impact was instant, catastrophic. Van Vuren was killed instantly, and the fire extinguisher struck Price in the head with unimaginable force. The car continued at full speed down the track, driverless, before crashing at the next turn. 2 lives gone in seconds. The silence that followed was deafening. The horror at Kyalami forced the FIA to rewrite its rulebook overnight. Marshals had to be properly trained, properly equipped, and never cross the track under green flag conditions. Double yellow flags and later, safety car systems became sacred. Tom Price's death became a haunting reminder. In Formula One, even heroism can turn fatal when order collapses into chaos. But F1's next disaster would come not from bravery, but from a track so unfit it melted under the sun. Race 7, 1976. German GP, the day the ring burned. August 1st, 1976. The Nürburgring Nordschleife, over 22 kilometers of twisting forest roads, 170 corners, and almost zero safety drivers called it the Green Hell. That day, it lived up to the name. On lap 2, in worsening rain, Niki Lauda, reigning world champion and one of the bravest minds in F1, lost control. His Ferrari slammed into the barriers, bounced back onto the track, and burst into flames. Trapped inside the cockpit, Lauda was engulfed as other cars sped past, until 4 fellow drivers, led by Arturo Merzario, pulled over and dragged him out with their bare hands. Lauda's face was burned, his lungs scorched, his life hanging by a thread. Doctors read him his last rites, and yet 6 weeks later, bandaged and bleeding, he returned to race again. The crash ended Nordschleife's time as a Formula One venue. The FIA banned it immediately. Too long, too remote, too dangerous. The German Grand Prix moved to Hockenheim, and F1 safety took another leap forward. Better barriers, faster fire response, mandatory medical helicopters. Lauda's survival became the turning point. The Nürburgring wasn't just a track, it was a warning. And then nearly 2 decades later, another disaster in America would make the world question if the sport had truly learned anything at all. Race 8, 1994, San Marino GP. The weekend that broke Formula One, Imola, Italy. April 30th to May 1st, 1994. It was supposed to be a normal race weekend. Instead, it became the darkest chapter in Formula One history. The first warning came on Friday. Rubens Barrichello's car hit the curb and went airborne, slamming into the barriers. He survived, but the paddock was shaken. Then, on Saturday, tragedy struck. Roland Ratzenberger, a rookie living his lifelong dream, crashed at Villeneuve Corner. His front wing failed, sending him straight into a concrete wall at 190 miles per hour. He died instantly, but the nightmare wasn't over. On Sunday, lap 7 of the Grand Prix, Ayrton Senna, a 3-time world champion and the soul of F1, lost control at Tamburello. His Williams smashed into the wall at 135 miles per hour. A suspension rod pierced his helmet. The crowd fell silent. The world fell silent. 2 drivers gone in one weekend. Imola 1994 forced Formula One to rebuild itself from the ground up. Cockpits were raised, barriers redesigned, helmets strengthened, pit lane speed limits introduced, and medical standards rewritten. F1's modern safety era began not with innovation, but with heartbreak. Senna's loss became the turning point. The sport would never again be the same. And though Imola was the blackest weekend in F1 history, its lessons would save countless lives in the decades that followed. But even years later, another race would remind everyone, F1 doesn't always learn the easy way. Race 9, 1982 Monaco GP, the race that nobody wanted to win. Monaco, 1982. The final laps of the Grand Prix looked normal, until they didn't. With just 3 laps to go, Alain Prost was leading comfortably, carving through the tight streets of Monte Carlo like clockwork. Then, rain out of nowhere. Prost hit the barriers at the harbour chicane. Riccardo Patrese took the lead and immediately spun at Lowe's hairpin. Next up was Didier Pironi, but his car coughed to a halt out of fuel. Andrea De Cesaris was about to inherit victory until his engine gave up too. Derek Daly followed. Gearbox failure. For a few seconds, nobody knew who was actually leading. Marshals were confused, commentators were guessing, and chaos ruled the streets. Then, somehow, Patrese, who had bump-started his stalled car after spinning, crossed the line, his first career win, and one of the wildest endings ever. That afternoon, Monaco taught Formula One that no race is over until it's really over. It was madness in slow motion, a 3-lap sequence where 5 men could have won, and only one managed to stay upright long enough to see the flag. And while Monaco ended in disbelief, the very next year, Formula One would face something far less amusing, a horror show that made drivers question if racing was worth dying for next race? Pure horror. The scary day Formula One recorded more deaths than points. Race 10, 1960 Belgian GP, the weekend of death. Spa-Francorchamps, 1960. 14 kilometers of public roads twisting through Belgian forests. Fast, flowing, and completely unforgiving drivers called it magnificent. Historians call it murderous. From the moment the race weekend began, disaster was waiting. In practice, both Sterling Moss and Mike Taylor suffered violent crashes at over 150 miles per hour. Moss shattered both legs. Taylor broke his neck and retired on the spot. But the worst was yet to come. When the lights went out on Sunday, the rain came down, and with it, chaos. On lap 20, Chris Bristow fought for position at Blanchimont when his car flipped into the barrier. He was thrown from the cockpit and killed instantly. Just minutes later, Alan Stacey's Lotus struck a bird at top speed. Blinded and dazed, he lost control, veered off, and met the same fate two young British drivers, gone within laps. Jim Clark, the winner, later said he hated Spa after that day, and he wasn't alone. The drivers wanted change, but the organizers stayed silent. Spa stayed on the calendar, and it would take more boycotts and near-deaths before the old circuit was finally abandoned for good. The message was clear: Spa's beauty hid brutality, and as the world mourned, Formula One still wasn't done flirting with danger, and that's the legacy of these races, each one forcing Formula One to tear up its own rulebook just to survive. Bonus: 1989 Canadian GP. The day survival was victory. Yes, I know we promised 10, but some races didn't need fire or crashes to break Formula One, just relentless chaos. That was Montreal, 1989. Rain, attrition, and pure endurance turned the Canadian Grand Prix into a demolition derby on tarmac. Cars spun, stalled, and snapped under pressure by halfway. More than half the grid was gone. Engines blew, gearboxes died, and even legends like Prost and Senna fell victim to mechanical failure. Only 10 cars saw the finish line, and even the winner, Thierry Boutsen, didn't lead until the very end. He inherited victory after both McLarens collapsed, crossing the line almost in disbelief. It wasn't domination, it was survival. Proof that sometimes the hardest race to win is simply the one you finish. Montreal '89 didn't just crown a victor, it reminded Formula One that endurance, not just speed, decides who survives the storm. And with that, our list is complete. 10 races, plus one unforgettable fireball that forced Formula One to change forever. From scandals to tragedy, from politics to survival, these moments prove F1 isn't just about speed. It's about adaptation, reinvention, survival. Now it's over to you. What race do you think should have made the cut? Drop it in the comments, because in Formula One, the next rule breaker is always just one race away.